Good evening, fellow Amazonians, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome to this very important broadcast. Thank you for tuning in. We are about 15 minutes behind schedule, but it's an important discussion we need to have. A few days ago, an excerpt of an interview with Dr. Simon Munzu. We know he's a person who has a long history with the SCNC, the Southern Cameroonian movement, for a long time, and he's an intellectual who probably has an insight of some of the technicalities or everything happening today to the people of Southern Cameroon. So he had a debate with a journalist in neighboring La République du Cameroon. It was a well-heated debate, and during this time he had the opportunity to narrate the Southern Cameroon's history in his own perspective. The narration has sparked some kind of controversy and debate on social media with people. A lot of Amazonians find his narrative a little bit unfair, but there are questions for us to have, and that's why I have with me a professor of history for decades. That's Professor Bridget Table, who is also a member of the Amazonian government. I have with me the lawyers that have been regular with us here, so that we can look at this from their lenses, from the lens of the historical facts and also the technical, the legal implications of every statement that was made. What really happened in 1961 is a question Amazonians will never stop asking, because even as we speak today, the consequences of those who calculated the future of Amazonia pre-independence, independence, is causing the life of over 60,000 Amazonian lives being wasted. So that's quite unfortunate. It's a discussion that we take very seriously. I would like to refresh our minds again with an excerpt of this video so we can watch very briefly. And right after we're done with that video, we will hand the mic for the panelists to examine whatever would have happened very closely. Let's have that video, please.
Good evening, Mr. Liu, and our great historian, doctor. Is he trying to say Southern Cameroon has never had independence? And where is the word restoration of the independence of Southern Cameroon coming from?
Indeed, let the questioner ask those who are talking about restoring the independence of Southern Cameroon. We had independence on the 1st of October 1961 by joining. Now, it may sound crazy, and we are entitled to say this is nonsense. How could they give us independence by joining? But that's what we got. That's what we got. So we got independence because, remember, the question at the plebiscite was, do you wish to achieve independence by joining the Federation of Nigeria or the Republic of Cameroon? And our people in Southern Cameroon voted in favor of achieving independence by joining the Republic of Cameroon. Our brothers and sisters in Northern Cameroon voted on the same day, by the way, on the same day, voted in favor of achieving independence by joining Nigeria. And today they are in Nigeria. Today they are in Nigeria. You know, so and then this is the next step that our people need to get clarity on. On that 1st of October 1961, two things happened, and they happened simultaneously at the same minute. At midnight on the night of September 30th to October 1st, 1961, Southern Cameroons achieved independence. Okay? And that is what marked the ending of the trusteeship agreement between the United Kingdom and the United Nations over this territory. because this territory achieved its independence and Britain was out. The United Kingdom was out. But at that same moment,
They were joining.
at that same moment, they joined Republic of Cameroon. And a new country, a new state was born called the Federal Republic of Cameroon. And under the constitution which came into force at that same moment, the constitution of 1st of October 1961, which again separatists in their propaganda tried to deny the validity of. Now, at that same moment, because the Federal Republic of Cameroon was born, made up of the federated state of West Cameroon, former British Trust Territory of the Southern Cameroons, and the federated state of East Cameroon, former Republic of Cameroon.
To form
a new country, Federal Republic of Cameroon. So all that happened simultaneously. Maybe if we had a situation where Southern Cameroon got its independence first,
for some months, 6
months, a year, gave it time to negotiate properly with La République on terms equal to equal sovereign states, as Zanzibar did with Tanganyika. You know, maybe it would have been a different ball game, but we didn't get that. So our people should be clear in terms of time, that the timeline, that this is what happened. But let me just end that again to highlight something that people may want to downplay, but is very significant. Do you know that at that same moment we're talking about, the sovereign state of Republic of Cameroon ceased to exist? It ceased to exist, and it became simply the federated state of East Cameroon in the new country called Federal Republic of Cameroon. The newly independent, if you like, instantly independent state of Southern Cameroons ceased to exist and became the federated state of West Cameroon. So our grievance, especially going to 1984, with the restoration of the name Republic of Cameroon, is precisely this: that Republic of Cameroon as a sovereign state ceased to exist, and it is clearly spelled out in Article 1 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Cameroon. So our grievance is, how can you, who ceased to exist in 1961, come back to life in 1984 without and then extend your rule over us? Because it's one of two things: either Republic of Cameroon in 1984.
Amazing. Good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Table, I miss you a lot. For a very long time I've not had time, and I'm very delighted that I missed your very busy schedule. You created a time to have a 2-hour conversation with us. And I want to especially welcome Barrister Pro and Barrister Mbesia, who are always here in, year out, making sure that the people of Ambassador are fully educated. So while I'll just begin the conversation, so good evening and welcome everyone. Good evening. Everyone just
Thank you.
Good. So I'll take it to you first. You heard this about 5 minutes narrative of Dr. Munzu. Somebody I think I respect the fact that he is an intellectual. He's supposed to be an elite in the Saudi Cameroonians community, even though a lot of Saudi Cameroonians, or those he would rather call separatists, today are frowning at him for his political opinion and position vis-a-vis the struggle of the people. You've heard his narrative, you've heard his historical interpretation and narrative. I'd like you to take your time and before even debunking maybe some of the things he would probably have said, and narrate to us what really happened. in terms of history. For those who are not aware, that you are professor of Boston, Massachusetts University of History, and you've been lecturing as a history professor for more than 20 years. So you are the rightful person in this panel to really talk to us based on this independence of Southern Cameroon. Please talk to us, Madam Prof.
Um, Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Director Paddy. Greetings to Barrister Fu and Barrister Mbesa. I'm Professor Bridget Thibault from the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth. And I teach African history and African American history and women's history. The issue of Cameroon's independence Southern Cameroon's independence, and that historical quagmire that we now find ourselves in is a troubling one. As we know, that Southern Cameroons was a UN trust territory, just like La République du Cameroun was a French trust territory. Now, whatever happened during the plebiscite was already very faulty. And the plebiscite polls of 1961 was not the answer to the union between Southern Cameroons and La République du Cameroun. The plebiscite question of February 11, 1961, had only to do with the polls' opinion. And the answer to those polls was not supposed to be a pact of union. Now, the UN proscribed a post-plebiscite conference to sort out the mess that was generated by the so-called independence by joining. I know I listened to that video and I was baffled at what Dr. Munzu was saying about that is what we got. Now, that is what we got doesn't make it right. That is what we got brought us to where we are today. And the question whether we wanted to join La République du Cameroun or what else? No other option. There should have been a third option. Now, they cited Northern Cameroons, or the British Northern Cameroons, joining Nigeria as an integral part of that nation. They did not say join in order to get independence. And so those are two different things to begin with. Now, if we assume that our forefathers or our leaders said yes to joining La République, it was based on the condition that there was going to be further discussions, as in that conference, post-plebiscite conference, that was supposed to sort out the modalities and the legality of the said joining. That conference never happened. All attempts by our leaders to make that conference happen were ignored. That only goes to show that by the time that La République du Cameroun returned to its original name from that federated states which was formed, the Federation of East Cameroon and West Cameroon, at that faulty union, there is no union treaty anywhere registered with the United Nations, nor do we have any copy in the archives in Boya or in the archives in Yaoundé, for that matter. That only goes to tell us that from the get-go, from the beginning, it was a scam. It was a ploy to get Southern Cameroons under the thumb of La République du Cameroon, thanks to France and, of course, the connivance of Britain. And so when in 1984, La République returned to the name before that union, it was obvious. And so today I see people running around in circles claiming, oh, secessionists are doing this, secessionists are doing that. Southern Cameroons did not secede. By changing the name from Federal Republic of Cameroon to United Republic of Cameroon and then back to La République du Cameroon, it was obvious. La République du Cameroon seceded first. If they have a right to do that, shouldn't Southern Cameroons have the right to restore their nation post
Of course.
union? So if we look at it keenly, we say that we've been dealing with a regime that is so conniving and malicious that nothing has worked. It's not for lack of our leaders complaining, but the bad faith of La République and the fact that they are tied to France in this pact for the continuation of colonization because they are looking at our resources gives us the right to continue to fight for our independence, to restore our state. I'll end here for now so that my co-panelists can say something and then we'll pick it up from there. Thank you so much.
That's amazing. Barrister Mbesi, I'd like to hand the mic to you before I come to Barrister Fru. If you listen to Prof, it's very clear. This is the narrative we've had, but she comes in to add some spice to it and makes it even more authentic because she's speaking from historical facts. I want us to go back to 1961 and pre-1961 before we even get to Monzo's argument, because he was trying to debunk the whole idea of the people of Ambazonia trying to restore an independence. I would think that if you listen to all the 5 minutes, he contradicted himself towards the end when he said Cameroon suddenly re-emerged, ignoring to use the fact of what Prof has just brought in now, that was actually a secession as described by von Goji Dinka. So let's look at it. The actions of the plebiscite. What were some of those things that were done, or the plebiscite that was imposed on the people of Southern Cameroons? How illegal was it? Was it in compliance with the United Nations Charter or in contravention of them? And if so be, can you give to us some of the details by Stamesia, please?
Well, I've said here many times before that Ambazonia, Southern Cameroon history is so documented. It's not an imagination. It's written down in black and white. Most importantly, the nation's record. The plebiscite that we're talking about, 11 February, did not come out of the blues. The plebiscite was put down in United Nations Resolution 1352 of October 1959. The questions to be asked at the plebiscite and the people entitled to vote. Paragraph 2 of that Resolution 1352 states that the people who would vote in that plebiscite were exclusively Southern Cameroonians. And who was a Southern Cameroonian? They described there somebody who was born in Southern Cameroon, born and bred in Southern Cameroon, or someone whose father or mother comes from Southern Cameroon. These are the citizens of British Southern Cameroons who were called to vote, who voted in 1961, February 11th plebiscite. Cameroon Republic was not involved in it. They didn't take part in the plebiscite. But before the Resolution 1352 ever came out, Ahidjo, who was then the Prime Minister of East Cameroon, French Cameroon, had been invited to the United Nations to discuss this independence by joining. I assure the United Nations 849th session that if the Southern Cameroonians voted to come and join them, not that both parties voted no, Southern Cameroon would enjoy her status as a state in its own right. That's the background. But fast forward, after the February 11th, when we voted, our intention, not the joining, our intention to join French Cameroon, that was clear. The majority who intended to join them. But on what conditions, we did not know, because I usually refused to give the details. Remember, before then, the plebiscite concerned us and Northern Cameroon. It concerned going either to Nigeria or coming to Cameroon. The Nigerian federal government had assured in writing, in Delhi, that if we voted to join Nigeria, it would be a separate region in the Federation of Nigeria. They had assured the Northern Cameroon, because they were considered differently, if they voted to Nigeria, there will be a separate province within the northern region of Nigeria. These were commitments known publicly. And so came the plebiscite, we voted to join Cameroon, 11 February. Then the United Nations reconvened documentarily in Resolution 1608 to confirm the results of the plebiscite and to then fix the date for the independence by joining. At that time, Cameroon had gotten independence. They were now members of the United Nations. Nigeria had gotten independence. They were now members of the United Nations. And when Resolution 1608 came up 21st of April to confirm this wish that we did, the majority of members present voted yes. But the Republic of Cameroon, that were supposed to join with them, voted no. They denied, in spite of their previous promises. They said, no, we have changed our mind. We don't want this idea of joining us by voting no. There's no other space for you there to explain why you voted no. They voted no, together with France and their other colonies. So they have rejected the idea of independence by joining. If the United Nations had been what we thought it should be, that would have been the end of the journey. Because you cannot force two parties to join when one of them says no. And to the best of my knowledge, I have not found any other international instrument, United Nations resolution, or any other international instrument that says that they can compel a country, member of the United Nations, to join with another one. Since Cameroon was a member of the United Nations and they said, no, we don't want this joining, the United Nations could not compare them to join with us. That would have ended the business. If the business ended on that day, with the note Cameroon was refused, would that not have given us independence down? It would have given us independence, because the date for independence had been fixed in that resolution, 1608, had been fixed by the 4B. That if the vote is now come 1st October, Southern Cameroon will become independent. And so that should have ended the matter. And it officially, in the eyes of the law, ended that discussion concerning Cameroon, Cameroon. And so their persistence, come October 1st, only other actions, come October 1st in the first place, they were now invaders. They had no authority to come to Goya and take over authority from GOP, because they had rejected the union. They said, we don't want to join. So on what basis would they come to Goya? They were legally not allowed to come. And from that time, they voted not to join. Any other action they took was illegal. The so-called Freedom Conference, we might come back to it, was manifestly illegal. Because why would you be discussing a constitution for a future union that you have rejected? It was legally illegal. And so Dr. Monzo, fast forward, he's saying his problem, I think, is that he thinks that our journey to independence is through one path. No, the events of the United Nations is only a multiplicity of events that would have accumulated in it. He rarely says that even though Cameroon had rejected it, came October 1st. They ceased to exist as the Republic of Cameroon. British Southern Cameroon ceased to exist again as British Southern Cameroon. They all became the Federal Republic of Cameroon under a constitution that I will address after this. And so if they cease to exist, and today the Republic of Cameroon now exists, according to him and as per the records, beginning 19. They are today the Republic of Cameroon. If they have come back to what they were, where is Southern Cameroon that had merged with them in the Republic of Cameroon, in the Federal Republic of Cameroon? Where is that one? What Dr. Munzu failed to say is this. Like a common marriage, madam is right there. Let me learn this point. Like a marriage, like the union was like a marriage. You and me are married. If I have a wife called Agnes Ta, and then she marries me, she loses her maiden name. She becomes my wife. You call her Madame Besser. If after 20 years, even 30 years, then my wife left me and went back to her parents, and did not just leave and go, she changed her name and going back to her maiden name. She's now called Agnes Ta, no longer Mrs. Mbesa. Can you say that woman is Tim Mbesa's wife? No. What will Mr. Mbesa do? If he cares about another wife, he's free to. But for all intents and purposes, legally, she is no longer my wife. And so when our people went back to what they were before in 1984, they had divorced. If Southern Cameroon chose to make any other union with somebody, so be it. If they choose to stand on their own, it's no longer their concern. And so that is the bottom line. If he had gone further to analyze this, because he says he mentions it, that will only have a genuine claim in the 1984. Of course we do. And that is why we never did anything until 1984 came and passed. We have been protesting based on the constitution they brought, which I will come back to it after this. But now that they have divorced, what does Dr. Munzu or anybody reasoning like him expect the divorcee, the abandoned husband or wife to become? To go and hang his on that? The original statement, she has reverted to her maiden name. She's called Merika. No longer Madam Mesa. Madam Mesa originally is no longer called Mrs. Mr. Mesa's wife to Merika. She has assumed his own maiden name.
Because you divorced and went with your name. That's a very
we are maiden name.
That's a very important
argument. So I think that's why we'll go back to the constitution. We'll go back to the constitution.
Yeah, we'll go back to the constitution, how it came on board and everything. But Mr. Fruit, this is what I wanted to find out.
Yes.
From if you listen to Prof and you listen to your fellow colleague by Sambesia, it is clear that all the process from 1960 or even pre-colonial times to 1961 and thereafter has simply just been fraudulent. It has been in contravention of the United Nations own charters. It has been in total disregard of the wishes of the people of Southern Cameroons, because when you listen to Prof, even the vote, the purported plebiscite vote was fraudulent. What do you have to say in this regard? I want us to take it from that historical part before we get into the constitution and what happened in 1984.
Thank you, Paddy. Thank you, Paddy. Thank you, Paddy. I listened very carefully to the excerpts of Dr. Monzo. I will come back to it. Now, to answer your question, the Monthly Conference that was held in 1959 did resolve two issues. Either we have our independence or we join with Nigeria. The issue of the La République du Cameroun, joining La République du Cameroun never featured in the Monthly Conference. it was much later in the United Nations that in formulating the question to be asked in that opinion polls, that's what I call the plebiscite, they left out the issue of our independence and added La République du Cameroun in the mix and said you have independence by joining either Nigeria or La République du Cameroun. Independence by joining. And when they did that, they rammed that down our throat by the plebiscite of 11 February 1961. Two options only. They left out the most important option of independence. And the United Nations, after that vote, took judicial notice of that vote and organized a general assembly for this purpose on the 21st of April 1961. And they voted Resolution 1608, which in its paragraph 4 declared our independence to be taking place on the 1st of October 1961. And they laid down the conditions for joining. In the paragraph 5 of Resolution 1608, which La République du Cameroun and all its acolytes refused because they never in the first place voted in that in that resolution. They voted no for our independence. They voted no for joining. They voted no for everything. So what interest did they have to come back to the issue of 1961 1st October? I would give my own opinion on that. If you look at the history of the UPC from the beginning had been laying claims to the Cameroons, to the southern Cameroons, and asking their establishment to have unification before La République should have independence in 1960. So Ahijo and his people connived and put a plan together. After voting against Resolution 1608, they came back. And in doing that, they skillfully voted a constitution, an amended constitution of the East Cameroon. They changed it to the so-called Federal Constitution of 1961 by doing what? By promulgating it on the 1st of September 1961, 1 month before 1st of October. It is that constitution that they brought to the Monzo conference, to the Pumban conference. And they didn't give the Southern Cameroons an opportunity to look at it and ratify by their parliament or by the authorities. They never had anything. They discussed nothing about paragraph 5 of Resolution 1608, which the Monzo conference was supposed to do to come to agreement to sign a treaty of joining. Why the treaty? That paragraph has been lifted directly from United Nations Charter Article 102. If another country, an independent country is joining another independent country, you must discuss the terms, the policy to be applied, and how you are going to join, and let that be filed in the Secretariat of the United Nations. It never happened. Professor Tebo put it very succinctly. It never happened. So what was the raison d'être for La République du Cameroun coming into 1st October 1961. They played it so well. The French played it so well with the connivance of the British. Because the French were supposed to be in Pumbaa, they were not. The British were supposed to be in Pumbaa, they were not. Ahijo only came to Pumbaa in the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony. They wanted us to endorse their constitution, which they had changed to a federal constitution in September, where we were not there. They refused to give a copy for us to go to our own parliament, which was still active in Boya, for them to ratify or not ratify. They didn't even have our team, our delegation to amend anything on that constitution. And when Ndele, Dwa, and a few others told Foncha that we have to walk out, what did Foncha do? Foncha told them, no, let's give it a try for 30 years. Look at where we are today. Dr. Munzu, let me go to him, is a skillful lawyer and a dishonest intellectual. He has told us 3 things happened simultaneously after midnight of 30th September 1961. The Southern Cameroons had their independence. Simultaneously, they joined the Republic of Cameroon. Simultaneously, the country's name changed to the Federal Republic of Cameroon on that day. The Federal Republic of Cameroon on that day. Dr. Munzu carefully left out what happened under Resolution 1608. Is it that because the Republic did not vote for it, that our own intellectuals will ignore it? What was the raison d'etre of Resolution 1608? And what was the raison d'etre of the Pumbaa Conference? It was a ploy, a tactical ploy to ensure that the plan that they had to incorporate the Southern Cameroons in their country, they need to have it realized, and they played this game, and that's where we are.
Amazing. I'm coming back to you now, Prof. Barrister True has really indicted a lot when it has to do with the UN articles, the UN Charter, the UN resolution. This is Aijo and his team, and the opposite side, totally ignoring the thing that were given as prescription for decolonization. And that's why I would agree with Prof. Kassina Nyang that the decolonization of the Southern Cameroons was botched. But again, the way it was actually done, there are some loopholes for individuals like Dr. Munzo to say that is what we got. He says that so lightly, that is what we got. And it would suffice that intellectuals like you, those who understand it, those who have been lecturing about it for decades, we need to come again and give some of this interpretation. Who made the error? Was it the United Nations? Was it Britain and France fraud? Who is to be held accountable based on reading the script? Because it's like a scripture that was actually read but was not adhered to. So I really want you to get into the depth before I go down to the lawyers so that they can tell us how we can legally approach this matter. Please talk to us, Prof.
I think the way you put that question is actually quite interesting. You have a couple of culprits here to blame, and
Yeah.
I think the first culprit is England and France, followed by the United Nations, because they knew exactly what was happening. And If they had done their work, if they realized that their own articles as the United Nations were not followed through, their recommendations were not followed through, they should have done something. But given the pressure from France and Britain on them, I think they just decided to turn a blind eye. And so they are not innocent in this matter. Of course, La République du Cameroun, Amadou Ahidjo, and Paul Biya took that mantle and ran with it. I must say that those are master manipulators that have been practicing that craft for more than 60 years. And they have resorted to all kinds of gimmicks, from divide and conquer to share acts of terrorism and human rights abuses on their own purported citizens. And so the blame really can go around. I must say that our own people, like Barrister Fru mentioned, were naive to think that they were dealing with normal people, to wait to try and see if things were going to work, not knowing that this was a totally different kind of people that don't care for the law, that don't care for any structured anything. And to think that Britain, that was supposed to be our own Southern Cameroon's parent, just left Southern Cameroons. No advice, no nothing, fled because they were going to protect the Suez Canal in Egypt or whatever was happening to them. While Amadou Ahidjo had been briefed and coached by France. And so we see a couple of things happening that did not bode well for Southern Cameroons. But that is not for lack of trying, because once people like Dr. John Foncha realized that this was a problem, they tried to protest, they tried to write letters, they tried to complain. And at one point, John Foncha tried to get Ahidjo to stop the delaying tactics and actually get to that discussion, that post-plebiscite conference. It never happened. And the systematic dismantling of Southern Cameroon's institutions only amplified the problem, to the point that when Foncha decided, okay, enough is enough, I'm going to go with my own delegation to the United Nations, guess what happened? British Airways refused to sell him a ticket. Refused to sell John Foncha an air ticket, claiming they were full. Who does that? Now, this is supposed to be a head of government from two states of equal status, and an airline company is refusing to give him or sell him, he wasn't getting it for free, sell him an air ticket, claiming they were full. Of course, they were only saying that because the pressure on their neck from Ahidjo and France was too much to bear. And so they refused to sell him that ticket. And that was clear conspiracy right there. And that conspiracy between Britain and France and the United Nations has been going on. Unfortunately, Southern Cameroons have been the ones to continue suffering, because that quote unquote decolonization that was supposed to have been fulfilled never really took place. And so in terms of who is guilty or who is to blame, I think those three parties are to blame. And I think, Southern Cameroons also has a share of the blame for taking too long to really react, because they could have reacted a long time ago. You adjust.
No, bro. Do you really think Southern Cameroons didn't react? If you would have the same systems are working today, blocking, because I'm still with you, Prof, before I can go to the lawyers. The same systems working today, they are able to block John Foncha from getting a flight. You can imagine the height of oppression that would have come at the time for a Southern Cameroons that was not the Southern Cameroons of today, that could even that has a powerful diasporic community and is ready to alarm and protest. Now, it was oppression coming from every angle. You heard the narrative of Barrister Fru there, giving the tactical mechanism that was used from within to manipulate even the
Yeah.
Manfred conference. So do
Yeah.
you think that the leaders of Southern Cameroon, because after this, I'm going to give the mic to Barrister Mbesia, who is going to tell us a little bit more about the so-called, what they call constitution. Do you really think that Southern Cameroonian leaders really didn't do much that they were supposed to do, or they did not have the capacity? They had the legal documents that were despised by those who wrote the documents, and so they could not even use it. But they did not have what it took to challenge France and a Hijo that was really backed by the people that were using him more. Do you think that was the case?
No, I don't think that. And what I was saying is that as naive as our leaders were, Southern
Yeah,
Cameroon's people, the population themselves, were
yeah,
equally
yeah,
naive and did not react, because what happened in 2016 and 2017 was a reaction to all of these grievances. Finally, people woke up. So what I'm saying is that should have been done a little bit earlier, because
okay,
our leaders had their hands tied. They couldn't do much. There was a lot of evil and killings and disappearances taking place that people were tired. But once a people rise up, it's difficult for you to stop them. And you cannot push people, you cannot continue pushing people against the wall and think that they will not react. And that is what we're seeing now. So all I'm saying is, in spite of what had been happening, in spite of our leaders feeling frustrated and being, you know, backed into a corner, the population could have also helped them to help us. We cannot just
yeah.
leave everything in the hands of leadership, because leadership can be controlled at a different level. But if the people rise up and say enough is enough, then somebody is bound to listen. That is
And
all I'm
somebody is
saying. I'm not
bound
saying
to
that.
lead them. Actually, by Stambesia, if you listen to
Exactly.
this, in agreement with you, because you've been talking about this for quite a long time, this has been a ploy. It was a ploy with forces beyond the supposed small Southern Cameroonian population that that had a young leadership from Enugu, even though it was democratic and mature politically, but really didn't have the forces behind them. It was a ploy that would oppress and divide the people, because you realize that even within the Southern Cameroonian community at the time, there was some division if you read closely the history. But that's not what I want you to focus on, by Stambesia. I want you to take us into that so-called constitution. Who voted the constitution? How did it suddenly become a constitution that will represent two states of equal status? And how was it being defined? Even if we had accepted it, how could that constitution have disappeared into thin air? Barrister Mbesia, please take us through that journey.
I will take you there, but give me a minute to go back. You know, who was to blame? The principal the person in the dock, government of Great Britain. They were what they were
Yeah,
administrators. They owned the territory like France under the 1946 Trust Agreement. They rendered account of the administration to the United States, not to us Amazonians. And so it is they who are offenders. I'm back to 1959 agreement. Manfred conference. I just said. When the Manfred conference came up, all our politicians, they didn't just go there alone. Francha and they didn't just go there alone. They went there with all our political forces, traditional chiefs and the like. And in Manfred, the consensus from our people was that they wanted their own independence. They did not opt to join anybody. They wanted full independence. And the British representative in that Manfred conference hit down his foot and said, no independence for you, because the Her Majesty's treasury is not going to be open for you to feed yourself. Their only excuse they gave for not giving us independence was that we didn't have the money to run our own country. That's what they meant by their treasury will not be open to us. But was this an honest assessment? No, this was 1959. It was because the British believed honestly that it would be better for us to join Nigeria, which was their colony already. Because by 1956, the British engineers had already discovered the oil wealth of the Bakassi Peninsula. They knew the wealth, they knew what belonged to us there. And so they thought that if we join Nigeria, there would be a better advantage to them. And so they would not let it go. It is the British who did it. Then, since 1959, when we stayed in Manfi, we won our own independence. 1959 came, March came, a few months after that. The United Nations had put out a policy that all trust territories shall be decolonized by early 1960. That was the policy of the United Nations. And when it came 1959 in March, in fact March 14th, they were at the United Nations General Assembly 13th session to discuss the independence of those countries. The first two they took was French Cameroon, that's Cameroon under France. And then the second one was Cameroon under the UK. They took the first one of Cameroon under France. And the French stood and said, yeah, they are right for independence. You can go. We have already agreed for their date of independence to the 1st of January. The United Nations General Assembly said that would be good. They passed resolution 1349 of 14 March 1959, saying that Cameroon under France shall become independent 1st of January 1960. That was over for them. The next case they took up was the file of British Southern Cameroon. And in that assembly, they invited Foncha. They invited Ndele, leader of the opposition. And then, of course, what they call the administrative authority, that's Great Britain, was there. Ndele and Foncha, who were representing politically our own people, said they wanted their own independence. The British stood up and said, no, these people are not qualified to have independence. They should go and join Nigeria or Cameroon. Both countries, Nigeria and Cameroon, were not independent yet. That was the argument of the UK for for March 1959. And then the assembly, as the people were there, said, but you want them to join this or this. What question shall they ask them? Britain did not have an answer. And so based on that, they passed resolution 1350, then the next resolution after 1349, and said, look, because Britain is not yet decided on what questions to ask, let us adjourn till October. And then we'll come back and Britain will explain to us the questions we want them to answer. And it was adjourned to 13th October 1959. Came that day, they came in again. Britain came now and said they have decided themselves on the questions to ask. Do you wish to join by independent by joining French Cameroon or by joining Nigeria? The United Nations said, okay, we'll agree to that. They put it down now. And that's why I said in that very resolution 1352, they stated who would vote and who would not vote. And so that's how it went. Back to your question, because Dr. Munzu has said that separatists have been making propaganda of the Constitution, that they did not exist. No, Dr. Monzo, it's not propaganda. As far as Ambazonian is concerned, that Constitution did not exist because they were not parties to it. They were not parties to it. Because what Ahijo did, Foncha and his delegation of on the invitation of Ahijo, which he claimed he was inviting them to come there to discuss the Constitution. That was July 17. But before July 17, in June, the British Southern Cameroon had met in Bamenda, the Bamenda Conference, and had their own draft constitution, which they thought they would give it to Yaoundé, and then they would jointly argue for and against and see what to adopt. And so Funcha delegation went to Fumban and got there hoping to discuss the constitution, the future federal constitution, with their brothers. Not just to discuss, to agree. They were not coming to make proposals, they were coming to discuss and agree. And when they got there, the unusual thing happened. There were 3 opening speeches. Ahijo gave the opening speech. Funcha gave an opening speech. And Endele Extraordinary was allowed. It was the area of the question. He gave an opening speech. That was the only first joint session they had. After that, Ahijo with a delegation of 12 as against Funcha with 50 left. They never saw them again. But Funcha and his 50-man delegation were confined in some rooms in Fumba. And they were given a copy of the French Cameroon Constitution to discuss and make proposals for amendment. They were not discussing and agreeing. They were supposed to make proposals to Ahijo, proposals that could be rejected or accepted. And so there was no discussion, there was no joint discussion, there was no joint agreement. But what happened after 4 days, came to the 1st July, where they came back, the thing had finished. They were now coming to close. And they came in, and Ahijo made the closing speech alone. But something had happened there. When they met as Anglophone generation, they had the draft constitution. Article 1 of that draft constitution stated thus: the Federal Republic of Cameroon shall be one and indivisible. Paragraph 1B. The Funchal delegation sat on that thing from 2:30, I have the minutes here, from 2:30 in the afternoon to 6. The Federal Republic shall be one and indivisible. And they all rejected it, that there is nothing called one and indivisible. And what went back to Ahijo. So when Ahijo came to close the session, the so-called conference on the 21st of April, Ahijo made a speech and said, look, I'm aware of the resistance of our brothers to this word, one and indivisible. And because they are so passionate about it, we are withdrawing the words of one and indivisible Federal Republic of Cameroon. And he withdrew it. That's why the Federal Constitution, a hard copy of which I have here, did not say that we were one and indivisible. I have a hard copy. This is a hard copy of the Constitution here, which was at the time for 35 francs. So they withdrew that part of the story. But again, to what Dr. Munzu says that it was propaganda. No, it was not propaganda. When Ambazonians, we today say we are not part of it, we are not part of it. Why? Because the Constitution of 1961, what they call the Federal Constitution, was conceived probably in France, sent to Yaoundé, it passed through the Assembly, the National Assembly of East Cameroon. They ratified it and Ahijo signed it into law 1st of September 1961. It never came to the West Cameroon, Southern Cameroon House of Assembly. It never came to the cabinet. We never took part in it. But what did that constitution contain? It is good for our followers to listen to us carefully. That constitution, I will tell you, was a ploy. It was not a federal constitution, in fact. It was a federal constitution by imagination. Because there was nothing federal other than the word federal constitution. There was nothing federal in that constitution. What do you expect to find in a federal constitution? You are trying to say something?
Yes, so I wanted to interject. Yeah, I was trying to interject because I was trying to interject there just to say,
allow him to go on.
No, he's going to go on.
Allow him to go on. Please.
I'm going to allow him, please. I'm going to allow him. So you are trying to say that this was simply a constitution carved or crafted to manipulate, because that's how they function all the time. The objective was just to manipulate.
It was a pure I was coming to that. It was a pure manipulation in black and white. And this is what I'm trying to explain. When you have a federal constitution, ordinarily speaking, what do you expect to see in a federal constitution? You expect to see the powers of the states that constitute that federation and the powers of the federal government. This federal constitution of 1961 did not have those provisions. It provided for the powers of the federal government, no powers of the federated states. Absolutely nothing. The powers of the federal government that range from everything I can imagine in the world were properly inscribed in Article 5 and 6. Listed all what they could do, land, taxes, they put everything there, Article 5 and 6. Then the powers of the federated states, that Southern Cameroon was consecrated in Article 38. Article 38 had no power. They gave only one sentence. Article 38, powers of the federated states, and the rest one sentence. Whatever is not mentioned in Article 4 and 5 and 6, the federated states can take. What they did not mention there, anything they are forgotten, you could take it. So
those are your powers.
was that,
Imaginary powers.
how was that federation going to work? How was Francia going to run the government in Boya without the right to tax anybody, without the right to collect taxes or custom duties or anything else? As you're putting your own way, it was a manipulation. And let me elucidate on that. It was a manipulation, a 10-year program put in place from France, within which they must absorb and assimilate Southern Cameroon.
Amazing.
So
I'll come in there. I like what you have said there. That's something I don't want us to.
Let me learn. And
there's a sentence you have made there that I don't want us to forget ever. There's a sentence you have made there. We might forget that sentence. So the so-called constitution was a 10-year program put forth by France with a clear objective to absorb and assimilate the Southern Cameroons. You can conclude now before Barrister Afro comes in. I don't want us to miss that.
Let me conclude. Then I've told of Article 38 that said that there was no power for the federated states. That was not the end of it. They went to Article 39. You expect the federated states to have their own government. They needed to have their own government, have their secretaries of state. But Article 39 stated in black and white, the leaders of the states, in other words, the leader of Southern Cameroon, and his government, that is secretaries of state there, shall be appointed by presidential decree. Article 38 and Article 39. How can a federation be in which the federal government appoints the government of the federated states? So again, I say it was a manipulation because they had put in place this idea of having a 10-year program. And I was just saying that I was not imagining. When we joined them, they came to Boya and set up something they call the French Cultural Center, which is almost opposite the Bongo Square. It is still there, but I think that used to be the French Cultural Center. In 1968, a cable from France passed through the French Cultural Center in Boya and stated that the assimilation was going too slow. The projected assimilation was too. It was in writing. And so this is a ploy. Again, to make it to tell that it was a manipulation. We have heard about Article 47 that, according to them, said that you will not change the constitution without whatever story. Yes, it was put there.
No, the federal document.
Yeah, but that very article was undercut by Article 2 of the same constitution, which stated and still states that the president can consult the country by way of referendum. So notwithstanding other Article 47 and 40, whatever thing, the president could take upon himself to consult the population by referendum, which is what they did. And then this is a legal argument. What happened in 1972? Was it a revision of the 1961 Constitution, which said that if we wanted to revise it, Article 47 will apply? Or it was a consultation to dismiss that Constitution and put in entirely a new Constitution?
We're going to come in 1972. You have taken it a little bit fast. I want to hear something from Barrister before we get there.
Yeah, so that is why I say it was a ploy. All the articles that were purportedly put there to protect the minority. Somewhere they were circumvented in the same constitution. Article 18, for example, said that nothing could pass in the Federal House of Assembly, which was 50 members. Only 10 Anglophones, they call them. But nothing will pass there until 6 of the 10 Anglophones voted for it. Even if all the 40 Francophones voted for it, it will not pass until 6 of the 10 Anglophones voted for it.
Amazing. But by Stafru,
So,
we've just heard by Stambesia X-rail what they call constitution and what Munzo indicted to support his argument. What do you have to say?
Barrister Mbesa has given a complete review of the so-called 1961 Constitution. It was a sham. It was intended to assimilate the Southern Cameroons, to give credence to what the UPC had been saying before 1955 when they were banned. Independence before, unification before independence. And I want to add that when it came to 1961, La République de Cameroon changed the word from unification to reunification to make sure that the assimilation process is not into question, is not called into question. The so-called 1961 Constitution, Barrister Mbesa has touched everything except Article 47, which he said something that was a little fishy. I know Article 2 of the so-called 1961 Constitution gives the President of the Republic to consult the nation by way of a referendum or in referenda if there are more than one. But that power was cut down by Article 47, which says in order to do that, you must take cognizance of the fact that the federal nature of that constitution cannot be touched by either an election or a referendum. It is clearly written. Therefore, even if he had to consult, he was supposed to respect in toto Article 47, which gives the Southern Cameroons an opportunity to react. That didn't happen. That didn't happen. Like we all agree, Barrister Mbesa, myself, and all the other lawyers, we agree that that constitution, it was not a constitution that was binding on us because it was one-sided and our people were not consulted. The parliament was not consulted, the cabinet was not consulted, and they ram it down in the course of their manipulation to assimilate us. And you want to know that they themselves have admitted that they failed to assimilate. This happened in France. Is it Monte Carlo where he was talking to Mo Ibrahim? When they was talking to Mo Ibrahim, they have failed. And that's why they came back and gave us they came back and thought they can give us what they call the special status, because they have failed to assimilate us in their system. And I want to make something that Dr. Monzo call a dishonest intellectual. He himself said that La République du Cameroon had no right to leave the federation and back to La République du Cameroon. That was seceding. Why is it that he did not know that that same night of the 30th of September, the Southern Cameroon had its independence, so we had the right to go back? But we don't have a right to. We cannot denounce our own independence because they have not denounced their own. So the question of restoring our independence, we were right to restore it, and we have gone back to it. Why is it a propaganda on the separatists and not a propaganda for La République Cameroon to have gone back to their own independence?
That's a very critical question, Barrister Fru. A very critical
Yes.
question.
And listen,
Munzo
La
was
République
just to debunk our restoration effort. His argument was an
Yes.
effort to debunk the restoration effort.
And I don't like conspiracy theories, but let me say this. Dr. Monzo has benefited from La République Cameroon more than any Southern Cameroon that I know. He was a university teacher under La République Cameroon. That is his effort. After that, when he read the resolutions of the All Anglophone Conference in Bamenda in 1994, that followed the All Anglophone Conference of 1993, I was there as a young lawyer from Douala. I was there in 93, I was there in 94. When he was reading it, he cried. And what did that resolution actually say? We shall return to what we were if the federation is not restored. And he read it. When he went and negotiated with La République de Cameroon to take a post in the United Nations, so that La République can propose him to the United Nations as under secretary. Where did he leave that resolution of the Southern Cameroons of the All Anglophone Conference?
It's like what Apostle Paul asked the Christians that he had visited at one time. Who bewitched you? And that's the kind of question.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And I am saying this.
Yeah, I've sent a communication to Dr. Correspondence to Dr. Munzo. I hope he responds because I would like to ask him some of these questions. Who bewitched you? How did Dr. Munzo in 1993-94 suddenly become the Dr. Munzo of 2026?
Let me proceed to say Monzo has a debt to pay to La République du Cameroon, and he can pay that debt by himself without using the Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia.
Amazing. Now let me quickly go
his fight for let me conclude. His fight for restoration of the federation is not going to happen neither with the La République people or with the Southern Cameroon, because we have long since left. La République du Cameroon succeeded in 1984, and we were left in the cold. We restored our independence in 2017 by the then president Ayub Julius. That's it.
At the time, he was the chairman of the governing council when that restoration was made. The restoration statement.
No. He was the president of the interim government.
It was after that he became president of the interim government after I think after the fourth conclave. So the independence was restored before the fourth conclave. After the restoration of the independence, they had the fourth conclave. This is a history that we're all documenting. Now, Prof, I'm coming to you. There's an important thing, which is the core of this discussion today. We now realize that Dr. Munzo was trying to debunk the argument by those he calls separatists. Our argument that what we're fighting for is the restoration of a stolen independence. If we look at your narration or the narratives that have been given here this afternoon, you realize that decolonization into the day of the supposed independence was already fraudulent. Now, my question goes thus. Are we going to base our argument for the restoration of this independence based on the circumstances that led to the independence of 1961? Because even from what Barrister Fu and Barrister Mbesi are saying, you realize that even our independence was botched. The constitution was fraudulent. The activities of the opposite side was fraudulent. Now, fast forward to 1984 when Cameroon seceded, and Fonkojijija uses that as his main argument that he has seceded. Which is the best scenario for us to use in our argument? Both or which? And that's where I would like you to come in from.
No, Paddy, point of order. Point of order. That question is unfair to Dr. Tebo. It's absolutely unfair. Let me explain. Let me explain. We have independence midnight. We have independence after midnight of 30th September.
Yes.
That is already 1st of October. And if La Republic went back to its 19 to La Republic to Cameroon, seceded in 1984, we had a right to restore our independence at the time we did, and we went back to the constitution that was then, and that is the orders in council that the British gave us. And we are now, listen, we are now in the process of organizing, having our country and redoing our own constitution to replace the orders in council. So you cannot say that our own was botched.
No, Barrister Fu, you're not getting my question. I put the question very fairly. We are arguing today about our restoration at many different quarters. First of all, we have restored it already. Now, at what point can we really use, based on history or historicity and legality, which point of history would it be best for us to bring on the limelight to say, hey, based on these circumstances, this is the justification of why we think that we're restoring our independence? And I'd like Prof to speak on that. When it comes to your turn, you could add to it. Please, Prof.
Okay. I think I tend to agree with Barrister Fru that this is a non-issue because we already had our independence. We have evidence that independence was October 1st, 1961. La République independence is January 1st, 1960. I have never seen a country refuse to celebrate their own independence. And they are dovetailing on February 11th to celebrate. Why can't they celebrate their own Independence Day? The other thing is, yes, we can look back to historical facts and we can look at the legal issues that tell the story, that show the evidence that we have a right to restore at the instrument of government, which refers to a required constitutional and legal framework for a union that was implicitly required under Resolution 1608. And through those demands for negotiations and discussions that failed, we have a right to do whatever we please. We're not going to sit there and start using semantics to try and argue away or belittle what our cause is. We had that independence. We were two states of equal status, and La République has no right to be dilly-dallying in the affairs of Southern Cameroons. They seceded in 1984. They have been the ones to create mayhem in that country. And so to go back to what Professor Munzu said, that La République ceased to exist, or the sovereign state of La République ceased to exist. it baffles me. If they cease to exist, how come they are still in control of everything in the country? How come they are fighting to garner Southern Cameroon's resources for themselves and annex Southern Cameroons? How come they are all over governance in Southern Cameroons, taking control of everything? And so this is where I think that we can look to the historical facts as well as use the legal frameworks to argue our case. Are you there, Dr. Paddy?
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I asked that question purposefully because this is an educational program, and I really want, when we process it, it helps our people to get the argument so that they're not embarrassed. Dr. Munzo, as a lecturer, his words has some authority to his students, and when he says things that are so wrong or probably manipulated, and we do not take our time to screen them, to x-ray the facts, historical facts, and the legal implications, it becomes a problem. But Stambesia, this is where I'm bringing the mic again to you. Is it right for us to just say whatever took place in 1961 was not really a unification because of even the constitution that you have x-rayed? It was a strategic, though they don't like us to use those words, but would it be correct for us to legally stand that whatever took place in 1961 was a strategic recolonization of the Southern Cameroons? By Sambesia, please.
Thank you for having me. I think we're making a big mistake. We're falling into the same trap of Dr. Munzu. We're making the same error. See, when we are here 2026 fighting for our restoration, what are we trying to restore? We are not just trying to restore independence. No, we're trying to restore our institutions and the state of British Southern Cameroon. That's in block what we're trying to restore. But the mistake Dr. Munzu makes, and we make also, is that we think that, I said earlier when we started, that we're going to win this argument through a one-way traffic. No. All what we're saying here and beyond is going to go to the table. We will bring all these arguments. I will either win all the arguments or will win some and lose some. And this is why, what will happen to us in 1961, 1959, 1946 is well known and documented. By 1946 agreement, they were supposed, under the Trust Agreement, Article 3, we were supposed to be led to independence or some type of self-determination. By 1961, we were already self-determined, we were already self-administering. There was no reason why we had to join somebody else. That's an argument, a legitimate argument. Will not be left out. So, when now it's 1961, and what happened to us, and what they did, wrongly or rightly, we are here today, 2026, because whatever 1961 has failed us. It has also failed the world. And so we have to look at it in that global context. There's no one single argument. And before let me just go back again to what we talked about, the abolition of the Federation. You see, the 1961 Constitution, Article 47 did not exist in isolation. It was created for the purposes of the amendment of the Federal Constitution. Because it doesn't say 47, 1, 2, and 3 are there. They contemplated that you could change the Constitution by going to the Parliament. And that's why I said, even if you introduce an amendment to our Constitution, it should never go to the character of the Federation. And he went further in Article 47.3 to say to pass that amendment through the National Assembly of 50 members, 47.3, six of the 10 Anglophones must vote for it. So it dealt with essentially and how to amend the constitution. But I've said here before that what happened in 1972 was it an amendment of the constitution or something else? It was something else. They were not amending the constitution because Article 1(2) gave the power to the president to consult the whole country for anything he wished by way of referendum. And so if you wish to abolish the constitution, create a new one like he did, you could go to the you could go by way of referendum, and that's what he did. But back to the question that you've asked. Now, when it comes to that, well, I said it's not a one-way traffic. Even if what they did in 1961 was the best, we still have the option to get out of it if we do not feel satisfied with it. Because as history shows, countries is multiplying decades. By then, Africa was not even 50. They have become more than 50. They are today 54. Where have the other countries come from? History has shown that human beings break off when they no longer feel satisfied. When they feel so hurt, they are free to walk away. And just taking it from Africa as you find it. What was Sudan in 1956? It was one country. They didn't have this history that we have. But today we have Sudan and South Sudan. Why did South Sudan break away from Sudan and successfully had its own independence without the consent of the United Nations, without the consent of the African Union? But today there's South Sudan. And so we have that path available to us. Why? Because human rights violations have been documented internationally and said there could be a cause for you to assert your right if you are abused to a certain point as a group, as an identifiable people, as people who meet the right to self-determination. You have self-determination and you walk away. That is international. The African Union has endorsed that in Communication 26603 of 2009. The African Union, the African Court for Human Rights, in I think paragraph 71 or so, 191, they stated that Ambazonians were asserting independence. They wanted independence. And Cameroon agreed. I said, yes, but they went on because they were trying to compare us to Katanga. I said you could assert that right only if you can show a massive abuse of human rights. That was 2009. Will they come to the same conclusion today if that matter was still before them? What would amount to a massive abuse of human rights? It would mean burning down villages. That is a war crime. Killing people in the street and cutting off Samsoya's head. That's a war crime. That's sufficiently great for you to say, look, they didn't kill Samsoya because you're not anything. They killed him because he was an Ambazonian. They didn't burn the villages everywhere up and down there because of it. They burned them because they were Ambazonian villages. And so that alone, based even on the African Union guidelines, that to meet that requirement, you need to show a massive abuse of human rights. In 1993, 1994, after Rwanda, they said never again should there be a genocide. We need to have lost a million people like who died in Rwanda to assert our rights. No. The killing of one person for who he or she is genocide. It's a good argument for you to say, look, I can no longer go into this. Like an abused marriage. You punch her one, she's not going to turn the right eye and say, let me be blind before I go away. She will walk away. That's why spousal abuse is intolerable. What these people have done to us up to this point, from 2017 till today, is a sufficient violation for us to argue our independence. That's why I say our way to independence is not a one-way traffic. We have all these things that we put together. A good lawyer will put all these arguments. If we don't win this, we'll win this. Dr. Munzu seems to think that if we go there, we're all going to argue that, well, this constitution was bad, we'll have independence. Yeah, we'll say that. But we are not going to end there. We're going to bring what is going on now. And if Dr. Munzu
This,
now
this
knows
is
so
this
well,
is
he was the
this,
head of the United Nations Human Rights Commission Department in Cote d'Ivoire. If this happened, what happened in Cote d'Ivoire in terms of the civil war, it does not even amount to 1/3 of what has happened to us. He is a human rights expert. He sat there in the United Nations office as human rights officer. And so if this does not constitute genocide to him, if the killing of the Ngarabo children, the killing of the children in Kuba, the burning of multiple villages is not genocide, what else is genocide? And if there is
I think
genocide,
by
and
Sambesia,
come out and tell
the
ourselves,
long and
what
short
else,
of this discussion,
what
the
else
long
can
and
we do
short
to
of this
ourselves
discussion is that
as an independent
by
human?
Sambesia,
So let us not,
just to
Let him finish.
okay.
let us not make this one-way traffic. As Sanson knows, you go to court, you put all your arguments, you classify them the best, maybe at the top or at the end. But all the arguments are on the table. And he who dare to challenge us can come and say again, as I've just said, the killing that we've had, if it is not genocide, what else is it? And it is genocide. Who on earth, a living human being, who want to continue to live in that genocidal situation? No, no. And so let us not make a mistake that if we lost, if we say, like the United Nations has made it clear,
By
according to
Sambesia, the
the
reason I'm coming in because I
according to
realize that
United Nations records.
you have made the point. I realize that you have
Let
made
me
the
just
point
finish.
that we must not take it
No,
as
no,
a
no, let me move
one-way
this. Let me
Yeah,
move this one. According to United Nations records, let me just finish. According to United Nations records that finish with the condition of Southern Cameroon. But is that a death trap to us? No, they are finished by their own records. But is that why we should remain in hell? Is it because they finished doing it wrongly? No. That's what I wanted to
and
say.
that's
Over to
where
you.
I was trying to get on so that we coordinate it. I know my prof is supposed to be going somewhere on top of the hour, so I'm trying to coordinate the program so that we take as much as possible from her before she leaves. And by Stambisia has just ushered us to the phase that we're going to use to conclude this particular portion of the discussion before we move to the next phase. And this is it. According to the records, Prof, the records of the United Nations, they are done with us, done and dusted. They've handed us and sold us to La Republic to Cameroon. And by Stambesi
Before
is
we go,
telling us,
before we go there, can I make just one sentence? Let's situate ourselves one sentence. No
please
two
make it.
countries in the world have independence twice. None. We have
Thank you.
restored us. We have restored us, and that's what it is. Independence.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Prof, I'm coming to you now so that we finish this quickly. I would like, because I want you to make a few contributions before you leave with the other part of it. According to the United Nations, they are done with us. By this analysis, it is clear that the United Nations conspired with the members of the Security Council, Britain and France, to sell us out. And they are claiming that they are done with us. What are some of the procedures that we can use? And Barrister Mbisi has brought some. I like talking with him because he brings examples as a smart lawyer that helps our argument. Southern Sudan separated without consulting them. How do we go about this? If we must use United Nations Charter to challenge whatever they claim to have been done with, how do we do that? If we have to despise it, what are some of the other rules they are doing? As a member and an advisor of the president, a member of government, it's important that we get your take on this issue by Professor Table, please.
Okay. I think first and foremost we want to remember that historically, Southern Cameroons was gifted to France. We have that in well documented in the archives. Un petit cadeau de la reine, which means the negotiations that C.K. King, the ambassador, British ambassador to Cameroon at that time, sent a note to Ahidjo once they discovered that oil was in Bakassi, to change Ahidjo's mind, to suddenly start liking the independence by joining was illegal, faulty, and criminal. And so that alone speaks to the conspiracy against Southern Cameroons. The other thing that we want to note is that all British territories, whether they were trust territories or colonial holdings, got their independence fair and square. No independence by joining, no gimmicks. And Southern Cameroons is the only territory that today is still in dispute because the United Nations and other powers want to believe that they're done with us. They cannot be done until they are held accountable for their own shortcomings. And so the way forward, therefore, like Barrister Mesa said, it's not just one way. Yes, we look at the historical facts, we look at the legality, and we also pursue modern and new diplomatic strategies.
Yeah.
Because it is a combination of those things that will give us the envisioned results.
Yeah.
And so backing against one tree will not help us. Only looking at the criminal side of that.
We're not leaving out the armed struggle that our brothers back home
Exactly.
are doing.
We are not living out that because they're doing self-defense. They were attacked. They were forced and backed into a corner by a degenerate head of state who gallivants all over the world, comes back to his own country as a pilgrim, and decided to declare war on his supposed people from the airport, not caring to know what was happening, not having the human capacity of a decent leader. Say, okay, what is this that I'm hearing? Let me talk to people and see what we can do, even if it's a lie, because we know that he's a liar. But at least pretending at that time to care would have made a difference. And so what is happening in terms of genocide, in terms of the war, is something that had to happen. And that is continuing because the results that people want are yet to be seen. Now, today, we're all getting excited because the Pope is coming. And because the Pope is going to Cameroon, some argue that there is some kind of hope because things may happen or not happen. We don't know yet. But there is this fanfare frenzy of cleanup campaign from Yaoundé to Douala to Bamenda. All the garbage in Yaoundé has been removed. They are painting streets, they are putting whitewash on the roads and things like that to give a semblance of normalcy. But we all know that there's no normalcy. The war is raging on, and many, many children and people have died, millions more locked up or in refugee camps. And so there is a couple of things that need to be done. The bottom line is diplomacy, the continued warfare or armed struggle for defense purposes that showcases the humanitarian abuses that the United Nations and the Human Rights Commissions have been turning a blind eye to, not really doing what they're supposed to do. And so there is more that needs to be done. But for now, we have the legal recourse, we have the historical backing and evidence, we have diplomatic strategies, and we have self-defense movements. Because if you sit in your house and somebody comes to burn you alive, you fight back. Thank you.
Amazing. This is just amazing. This discussion, I wish we can extrapolate it. Like I said, I've made a correspondence with Dr. Monzo. When he is probably available, we can have, he's an Amazonian born, even though he is not, he's a Southern Cameroonian born, even though he doesn't recognize himself or identify himself with the so-called separatists. I think we'll continue the discussion any day he's available. Prof, you are not leaving yet. I want to utilize these few minutes that you've given to me to get you involved. You just mentioned something about the Pope. We'll take a very quick break with Tabitha that has a few things to tell us. And when we come back, I'll give you the chance to make a brief comment so that you can leave for the meeting that you're supposed to leave for. And I'll have
Before, can I add my before you go to do that? Can I add my own reason? Can I add just one sentence on what Professor Tebo has said? Another thing that we can do is to get a member of the Security Council, one of the big members of the Security Council, to deposit a resolution at the Security Council highlighting all what we have just discussed, from the right to self-determination, the Bouch decolonization of the Southern Cameroons, and so on, and put it at the United Nations, and let's see who would veto it and who will vote against it. And that doesn't end there. We now take it to various countries and get recognized, and if we are admitted, it is brought to the General Assembly for a vote. And let's see who will vote that genocide, which was decried, as Barrister Mbesa said, in Rwanda, took place in the Southern Cameroon, and the world is silent about it.
Yeah, that is part of that diplomatic strategy.
It's so brilliant me talking with you. Prof, you're about saying something before that?
No, I was saying that I have about 20-30 minutes.
Oh, amazing. Thank you very much for that time. So very quickly, let's get into the newsroom to hear what Tabitha has to tell us. We'll be right back.
Ambazonia, and coming in from the home front. A deadly flood incident in Mile 2 Bamenda has claimed multiple lives, with army rescue teams recovering 4 bodies on Friday morning, following torrential rains that swept through the area with the previous evening. The tragedy unfolded on Thursday when a makeshift bridge collapsed under the force of heavy rainfall and fast-moving floodwaters. Witnesses say the temporary structure, built on loose soil, gave way while pedestrians were attempting to cross, plunging several people into the raging currents below. Rescue operations began early Friday, with military personnel combining the area for victims. Authorities confirmed that at least 4 bodies have been recovered as of press time, though the total number of casualties remains uncertain. Officials say a clearer picture is expected once such efforts are completed. Now, among the victims identified is Injini Courage, a nurse at Nkwen Baptist Hospital and a devoted member of Nkwen Baptist Church. She was reportedly returning from church activities when she was caught in the floodwaters and swept away. Her death has left her 3 children motherless and sparked an outpouring of grief across the community. She was found wearing her Cameroon Baptist Convention Women's Fellowship uniform, a detail that has deeply touched colleagues, church members, and residents alike. Friends and co-workers have described her as a compassionate caregiver and committed Christian whose life was dedicated to service. Survivors recounted moments of panic as the bridge collapsed, with some managing to escape the rushing waters while others were carried away. Residents say the Mile 2 area has long been vulnerable to flooding, particularly during periods of intense rainfall due to poor drainage and unstable infrastructure. Now we see that the latest disaster has reignited concerns over the safety of makeshift crossings and the urgent need for durable infrastructure in flood-prone zones. Community members are calling on authorities to take immediate action to prevent similar incidents as the rainy season continues. Local officials have yet to release a comprehensive statement on the incident, but the ongoing rescue mission underscores the scale of the tragedy. As such teams continue their work, families across Bamenda wait anxiously for the news of missing loved ones. The incident adds to growing concerns about the impact of extreme weather and inadequate urban planning in the region, as communities grapple with recurring floods and their devastating consequences. Now, moving ahead and bringing you over to this report. With Pope Leo XIV's scheduled visit to colonial French Cameroon set to begin in mid-April, anticipation is building across Central Africa nation, particularly among communities affected by the years-long Southern Cameroonian crisis. The papal itinerary recently released by the Vatican outlines engagement in both Yaoundé and Bamenda, including meetings with political, civic, and religious leaders, and a meeting for peace in Bamenda St. Joseph's Cathedral, a city at the heart of the country's Amazonian war. For many colonial French Cameroonians, this visit is not only a religious event, but a potential turning point in a conflict that has deeply scarred the nation and displaced hundreds of thousands. Local religious figures and civil society leaders have increasingly called on the Pope to use his moral authority to urge a cessation of violence by all parties in southern Cameroon, where Amazonia and Amazonian government forces have battled since 2016. Among these calls are demands for the release of prisoners of conscience, including high-profile detainees like the Nera 10, who were arrested amid the crisis, and a renewed push for inclusive dialogue between the government and Amazonia to end nearly a decade of fighting in what supporters of the Amazonian movement describe as a struggle for political recognition and autonomy. Observers are also calling for independent investigations into alleged extrajudicial killings and human rights abuses committed by both state forces and armed groups, justice for clergy and civilians killed or kidnapped during the crisis, electoral reforms to ensure transparency and fairness in colonial French Cameroon's political processes, and a strengthened fight against corruption and mismanagement, which critics say have exacerbated national tensions. The expectations of colonial French Cameroonians are high, said one leading local commentator. Many see the Pope's visit as an opportunity for international moral pressure towards a sustainable peace, while the Vatican's public statement have stressed the pastoral nature of the visit. Earlier, Catholic diplomacy in Cameroon has consistently urged dialogue and reconciliation. Meanwhile, French Cameroonian bishops and religious leaders have similarly called for inter-religious cooperation and national unity, actively endorsing peace efforts and inclusive dialogue as essential to ending the crisis. Now we see that the crisis in colonial French Cameroon regions has its roots in long-standing grievances with southern Cameroon, who have been marginalized in a predominantly Amazonia region. What began as protests over legal and educational marginalization evolved into an armed conflict when separatist group declared independence for Amazonia Republic in 2017. International peace initiatives, including government-led dialogue efforts, have so far failed to yield a lasting result. Both sides continue to report ceasefire violations, civilian casualties, and a humanitarian crisis that has seen towns depopulated and services disrupted. As the countdown to Pope Leo XIV's visit continues, stakeholders from across colonial French Cameroon's divided political and social spectrum are watching closely. For many affected families, the visit represents hope, not just for spiritual solace, but for concrete steps toward peace, justice, and national reconciliation. Analysts say the Pope's words and actions in Yaoundé and Bamenda could reverberate beyond religious circles, influencing diplomatic and peace-building efforts in one of Africa's longest-running crises. Now, away from that and bringing you over to this report, Akwaya in Manyu County is facing a deepening humanitarian and security crisis as recurrent attacks by Fulani raiders continue to devastate local communities. The former moderator of the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon, Reverend Funky Samuel Foba, has expressed anguish over what he describes as total government neglect and worsening insecurity in his native area. Residents of Akwaya live in extreme isolation with no motorable roads, electricity, hospitals, pipeline water, or even reliable internet, forcing them to survive under very harsh conditions. Now we see that the absence of infrastructure has left the government with a limited capacity to respond effectively to security threats, with soldiers reportedly relying on helicopters to assess the area. Armed groups allegedly crossing over from neighboring Nigeria have targeted homes and farmlands, resulting in death, displacement, and repeated attacks, even on Reverend Funkin's own compound. Communications are similarly constrained, with residents only able to access internet and mobile networks intermittently through Nigeria's Globacom by climbing hills. Now we see that the ongoing crisis in lack of basic services have left communities marginalized, compounding their suffering and isolating them from development opportunities. Local leaders and observers warn that without urgent intervention from the government, the humanitarian situation in Akwaya and neighboring Menchom Valley subdivision will continue to deteriorate, leaving residents trapped in insecurity and deprivation. And this is the end of today's Undaunted. Right here, we'll be heading it over to our news director and commentators to give us more in-depth analysis with the report.
I wish I know where to start because each and every one of these reports seem to be very important. How I just wish I will know where to start. But maybe we should take it from top bottom. It begins with a flood. This is a nation that we've just analyzed how it was recolonized, how it was invaded by Ijo, and how the institutions that could enable development, like the marketing board, the Cameroon Bank, and everything that Southern Cameroons had was systematically destroyed. Now you have hoodlums appointed mostly by Yaoundé, just there to keep the people in abject poverty. I wouldn't say that what happened in the Nkwen was not a natural disaster, but this was avoidable in a small city that can have rehabilitation, whose facilities are being rehabilitated. Even hours after the situation, there was no army or police there to rescue people. You had just denizens around that did with local ropes and everything getting into the dishes to free people who were victims. It is really a sad situation. And I will begin that with you, Barrister Fro, before we get to Pro. What do you make of this whole situation, please?
Before I say anything, we have fallen again in the trap of La République du Cameroon in terms of physiology. How can we be fighting a war since the 30th of September 2017, and we continue to call it, given the narrative of La République du Cameroon, a crisis? There's a war between the Southern Cameroons and La République du Cameroon. It's not a crisis. What is a crisis? What is that? Is that a synonym to war? I think ABC should rephrase, should look upon this and re-strategize. and give it a name and call it war. Having said that, you see, the city of Bamenda has never been the problem of La Republic of Cameroon. They don't care what happens to the city. Because if my memory is right, there was a bridge on that stretch of river, whether you call it river or stream, that collapsed. Since last year, nobody said anything. The people in that area provided a temporary crossing, and that's what has caused this disaster, given the heavy floods, given the heavy rains in Bamenda and the flooding of that river. Who are we to blame? The management of the city, which is not in our hands yet, is in the hands of the occupier, and they go to Bamita and pick up a Pentecostal pastor to become the mayor of Bamenda, and he has never addressed himself to the people of that area, Maitu, where that bridge had collapsed about a year or so ago, to ensure that there is security for the people if they have to cross from one side of the town to another. And this is a tragedy. 7 people added to the number that we have, that La Republique du Cameroon disguises and kills our people in Bamenda. You see where Bamenda is. Now the coming of the Pope, they have now come to Bamenda to do some cosmetic, I don't know what. I said they said they are building a road. When the Pope goes, you will see the nature of that road. But having said that, I am a little bit happy that the Pope's coming has given us a little bit of circulation chance to circulate between Mancon and Quen, and Mancon and Bafut, and Mancon and the villages around, through the road that is leading to the airport, to go and pick the Pope, bring to the cathedral, and take the Pope back to the airport where he will say a mass. We thank God for that.
That's amazing. It is a sad situation. I hope we're not getting some echo from my angle. Are we getting the echo, or am I the one just getting?
There is some echo from your end.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, that was from you, buddy.
Yeah.
Now,
you have many. Put up one. You have many devices. Put up one or two.
As in console to connect and to produce. So that's what is happening. It's a sad situation. I'd like to hear from you.
From me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it really pains me to see how people just lost their lives in Bamenda. I am an Abakwa old girl, and so that is really, really painful to watch. And this is not something that could be taken for granted. That accident could have been avoided if people who were put in positions of power did their job. But how can that even be? When since independence, there's been obvious bias and segregation of Southern Cameroons, politically, socially, economically. The lack of infrastructure in that region and Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia at large, is deplorable. Bad roads, few or ill-equipped hospitals, it's not surprising that a makeshift bridge will just collapse, under a Ahijo. Public investments and political appointments favored the Fulani Northerners or East Cameroonians. The pattern has not changed. We have the token few so-called Anglophones who are in positions of so-called power, but who cannot do anything. Under Biya, his successor, these positions went to Southerners and Betis. And so it is a deplorable situation that Southern Cameroonians, aka Ambazonians, are living. A situation where you can just get up one morning and you are crossing a makeshift bridge and you die. And this is happening within the context of a war that has been raging for close to 9 years. And people think that it's normal, And that takes us back to the really manipulative, evil regime that we're dealing with. A regime that does whatever it pleases. In fact, in 2009, the Banjul Court, African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Gambia, judgment acknowledged Southern Cameroons as a distinct territory and people from East Cameroon. That should have been something to consider by this government of La République. In 2010, during the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan's visit to Yaoundé, he called for quote-unquote meaningful dialogue between stakeholders, that is Southern Cameroons, and La République, and nothing came out of it. And so Mr. Biya, the so-called president, ignored it with impunity and has continued to ignore everything with impunity. And so in 2010, the UN envoys presented the two maps to him, two maps of Southern Cameroons and La République. You would think that after all these efforts, somebody with a conscience or somebody who actually even cares for his own nation would do something. But this is a country that thrives on corruption and evil, a country where people go without salaries for months, but then a state minister or director of cabinet could burn millions of dollars or francs CFAs in his house for fear of being caught. Who burns money when they could have used that money to build roads instead of makeshift bridges? And so I will join Barrister Fruit to say maybe the Pope's visit will do something. But this is not the first time the Pope is coming to Cameroon. So we can only keep our fingers crossed. I think this is the third time. So we're thinking the third time will be a charm. Or the fourth time rather, thank you. So hopefully this Pope will make a difference, because all the other popes have been whining and dining with the regime and nothing has been done. So let's hope that the clergy will do as he preaches and bring peace to that country. I really am saddened by the state of affairs that we are seeing, especially because I was reading somewhere I think in a newspaper, that while the country or poorer people are being deprived, the elites and the so-called powers that be are gifting themselves luxury vehicles. The president of the Senate is retiring and they're giving him 7 or 6 luxury cars, 6 million allowance, 2.5 for his wife per month. Who does that? Who actually does something like that when people are struggling? When the nation as a whole is on its knees? And of course, his assistant, Kavayeye, is also demanding that kind of gifting. So the total politics of the stomach that they practice has nothing to do with the poor people and citizens in Cameroon. And that is why people are dying left, right, and center. It is deplorable. And I feel I cry for that country. Thank you.
Barrister Messiah, please.
Again, thank you for having us. You see, you must read the Republic's mind. First, the colonial occupiers. It is their responsibility while they are in occupation of the territory to provide roads, to provide hospitals, to provide schools. That's the function of the colonial master. The British opened those schools that we had there as colonial administrators, Sasse, Ali, and the rest. And so these people are duty bound to do what they're supposed to do. But they have never done it. Remember a few months, even a year or so ago, the French ambassador came to Bamenda and announced a large package of money to come and reconstruct the Bamenda roads. It never happened. It never happened. It's happening now. Why is it happening now? It is because the Pope is coming. They are doing it not because they want Bamenda people, not because they want anything there. They are doing it to salvage their own image, to make them look good. To the extent that, to the best of our knowledge, what they call Barefoot Airport has until today been a mass burial ground for the things done by them. The kill of Amazonians are there. But that mass grave has suddenly been turned into an airport where you find people do propaganda. They go there with brooms to sweep, in the name of trying to. Well, so be it. But what I'm trying to say is simply that these people are not ashamed. They do what they want, that it favors their interests. If the Pope will come with his delegation and return to the Vatican with a good impression of Mr. Paul Biya's government and the CPDM, they will do it, even if it means killing you. But the people who drown there are just the tip of the iceberg. This very week, I remember seeing accidents and two major accidents in the midst of construction. 4, 5, 6. Oh, in Akum. Akum is just part of Bamenda. Why this rush? They want to show the Pope that they are doing a wonderful job. That is their goal. And they will not change. It's a very criminal group of people. They never change the narrative. They insist and get what they want to get, no matter how illegal it is. We're in war today. Why? Because in 2016, the teachers and the lawyers in their demand, among others, asked for a revisitation of the form of state. They look at the form of state, and because they declared war on people, called the national dialogue, they have not changed the form of state. They've insisted the discussion of the form of state is totally outlawed. And so they get what they want to get, to do it. It should be an eye-opener to Amazonians. Yes, the Pope will come, he will be in Bamenda for a few hours and leave. And when he leaves, Bamenda will remain. Amazonia will remain. We are not at war today because they did not dig the streets in Bamenda. We are not at war today because the Barefoot Airport became a mass burial ground. We are not at war with the abandoned Tico Airport. Those things are irrelevant. We are at war because they destroyed us as an institution. Because had we survived, we would have better airports. Tico would have been a better airport than today. And those who knew of Tico, we know of Bisangobang, we know of Bali. Those airports would be better airports today. And so that's the reason why we'll fight against all this occupation. And we'll fight until we get what we want to get. Roads we will take. I had the opportunity during the week to come to this issue. If we had been ambassador as we used to be, have all the equipment to maintain us. The PWD is the sing song in our house. We had those equipment to do the potholes. Even if we didn't have the roads, we make sure the roads were possible. Actually came out. If they would not, they will kill you. President Sojo said they are not doing it, they don't like us. And they don't like us. As long as it doesn't set their interest on us. Those also are familiar and old enough. No, there's way There's a place that they call Obudu Ranch. Obudu was Cameroon. But because it was not serving them, because they were there, Obudu has become Nigeria. But they would rather kill everybody asking about Bakassi oil. Which oil they steal. Nobody from Bakassi, Jan, Anton, a messenger in the SNH. And the money is stolen there by a man and his wife. If he's not there, his wife takes over as the director. And again, this is why we fight, and this is why we must continue to fight. See, Ambazona is bigger than Bamenda Roads. Ambazona is bigger than Manfield Roads. Ambazonia is something for which we will fight and die. And until we were saying earlier, until we restore what is rightfully ours, then shall they be held accountable. If you ask me my opinion, I would say let it take us 20 years, 30 years. We will prevail. And when we do prevail, they would have to pay compensation. Just 2 days ago, there was a United Nations resolution describing slavery that passed 200-300 years ago as a war crime, as a genocide. And so, it passed 200 years ago, and today it is being addressed. What prevents you to think that, what makes them to think that what they are doing today, 10 years, 15 years after we're free, will not come back to the table? It will. It will. Yeah. Because, these people are so soulless. We were talking about them. I'll give you an example. South Sudan, because we ask the Munzu and the rest, they don't want to compare us to South Sudan. For one thing, they say, where the fight took long. The South Sudanese fought for 20 years, 21 years. People died. Mm-hmm. Well, we have that already. We have been in the war now for almost 10 years. And so we are closer, if we must measure ourselves compared to South Sudan, we are closer to victory than we were ever in 60. Our parents did their best. I thought them died in that process. But shall we ever forget Ben Muna, who on his dying made this prediction? Fight and fight, because the future is yours. We are great. We will not resurrect to come and fight for you, because the future is yours. Not mine today, because I must go Ben Muna. Surely the future is for our children. And so they deceive themselves. The Bamenda, I just said, it was something preventable. But they were not prevent it because they were rushing to finish the job, at least to put paint, so that folks see it, not for them. And so there's only so much you can do to deceive people. So you can deceive people so at time. You cannot deceive people every day and all day. There's an important. We're a generation different from the 1960s, the 70s, and the 80s. This is a generation of the 2000s. So we shall those things will be held accountable for. We can only wish that those people who perish in that breach, the construction company that did that thing, will go after them, pay the full measure of
It's quite remarkable what you have said. There's an aspect that I know we really didn't talk on, but I think it's okay. It is the Fulani guns or arms men that are being patronized from Nigeria. They are now affecting Akwaya. It was in Donga Mantu. And Cameroon is stylishly, because their army is done probably doing their dirty jobs. They are patronizing these Fulanis every day. It's a serious thing we need to take seriously. We need to always include in our, and we have evidence already on this platform that Ndawara is a sponsor of terrorist groups in Nigeria into Cameroon that are coming to affect people. We have evidence that Ngala Gerard is actually also patronizing these people to kill his own people. It's a discussion I will never stop talking about, because every day news getting into the newsroom is only showing that now the B has allowed strategically, but if I like to comment on that very briefly and quickly, very briefly, the B is gradually handing over their job of the annihilation of our people in certain regions. Akwaya today is a victim. But it's a preventivity.
Now, the bill has been defeated, and their government has no choice but to go and contract the Fulanis, who are terrorists, who are killers, to come and kill Southern Cameroons to their victory. It will not happen. It will not happen because now we know that we have to switch from the B fight to the Fulani fight. And I don't care how long it takes. I may not live to see it, but we are going to fight to the last man standing. Because La Republic is showing the fact that it's incapable of defeating the Southern Cameroons at war, which we keep calling crisis. That's offensive. It's a war. And the community need to know. The Pope needs to know that it's a war between the Southern Cameroons and La Republic of Cameroon, not a crisis. La Republic invented that word, crisis, to let everybody in the world know that, it's not a civil war, we are not fighting our own people, it's a crisis that has happened in the Northwest and Southwest. It's a war that is going on, and people are being killed, and La Republic is committing war crimes. How can they come out of war crimes to say that it was a crisis and not a war? Having said that, the Fulanis are in Akwaya, and if you listen to the so-called man of God, they call Reverend Funky, on the Pigeon News, one of the things he said that was very offensive to me was that, from the village on the side of Akwaya that I come from, they don't have amber. There's no amber. Because we met as elites and told our children not to join that thing they call amber. And that guns don't pay. But when the interviewer said there are some ambers in Akwaya, he said yes, there are in some parts of Akwaya, but what are they doing? They are not fighting the Fulanis. Let them go out and fight the Fulanis who are coming and burning our farms and raping our mothers and our children, our wives and so on. Let them amber wherever they are in the bushes, come out and fight them. The guy who was questioning went ahead and asked, don't you think that the amber that are still there, who are few, they will be confronted by the army? He said, no, the army only come when they have a reason to come. What are you telling we the Southern Cameroonians? That the Fulanis have replaced La Republic of Cameroon army, and you are with that, and you are saying that the Cameroon army should not come. Let the amber fight for the Fulanis. Well, thank you. You have told the whole world that the Cameroon army no longer exists in Akwaya, and that the amber should help to fight the Fulanis. And you went ahead to say there's no amber in your own village. May the Almighty help you.
I'm trying to
now, Paddy, we know that the Fulanis have been armed by La Republic of Cameroon. One of the witnesses that the young boy Mororo boy that was caught, he gave the whole story. 11 guns were given to the Fulanis in part of Ndu, and they were given by the duo of what do they call it? One of the duos of Donga Manto gave the 11 guns. That boy gave the names of those the people who were giving those guns. Now we know that La Republic is financing, is giving guns, and is paying the Fulanis to fight their fight in the Southern Cameroons. That It's a
That's
fact.
amazing. Thank you for highlighting those facts there, Barrister Fru. Just so we can conclude the program, I would like us to move into an important segment. But just before that, you were the one who mentioned it. Barrister Mbesia is the one who brought that, and I would like Prof to comment on it. So, but before that, I'd like to hear what Tabitha has to say on that. It has to do with the resurfacing or the fight that was championed by the president of Ghana, where we had almost every country in the world at the General Assembly, almost every representative at the General Assembly, United Nations General Assembly, voted a yes, that slavery is the #1 crime against humanity as recorded by history. But three nations remarkably voted against. It's a major concern. #1, you had the United States, you had Israel, you had Argentina. Israel, is shocking that Israel will vote against because Israel is known very well for their Holocaust and that they've received solidarity and support globally. Perhaps it's because they are an ally to the United States and that they will vote against this. But the concern here is Argentina, where a huge chunk of these slaves went to Argentina to cultivate their farms. And the United States of America that has literally been built by immigrants and slaves. Sometime last year, we understand that there was a proposal to change the United States history. Some say some white supremacists are not comfortable to have the slave history being taught to their children. So it's like something they don't want to see it. And what is my interest in this is the same thing happening in Southern Cameroons. Macron visited the Cameroons and proposed a rewrite of the history that even was not properly documented. And all of these attempt to rewrite history, which we are making the efforts to document it today so that nobody rewrites what is happening today to our children, is a way of manipulating a generation of people. If America is feeling uncomfortable that I think we don't even need to go to the world news so that we don't waste the time of this panel. If America is feeling uncomfortable to have this history being told to their progeny, is it because they want to, from what people are thinking, that the whites or the white supremacists are feeling that they are suddenly becoming a minority, or is that they are not willing to take to take responsibility for what their forebears did and to carve a future way of equality? Lots of questions to be asked in this regard, Prof. But I'd like you to start by looking at this whole thing, giving your analysis as a history teacher that really understand. Sorry, history teacher is an understatement. History professor that has a great and a depth of this, and you're teaching African history in America. What do you think about this whole thing and the way it is unfold? Fortunately, there was a large
Um,
vote. Yeah, please.
okay. That in fact that vote comes on the heels of several tries over the years because various nations have been trying to get reparations on the table. And I think primarily the resistance has been the lack of empathy for captives or slaves and the economic component, because talking about it, thinking about it, also implies that once slavery is considered a crime against humanities, it is followed by reparations. And I don't think the United Nations or the United States wants to go there because of reparations, as in monetary or landed property to be given or restored to Black descendants. Number two, the issue of slavery is a dark, dark history. And nobody is comfortable talking about it, but it is a necessary history that people need to know. Because the issue of racism that continues around the world, and especially in the United States, came from slavery and slave trade. And so whether the white supremacists are feeling all of a sudden uncomfortable has to do with the fact that their position of authority is being challenged, and all of a sudden they are going to be made to apologize to the Black community or to descendants of Black families. And so the dual issue of monetary reparations and acknowledgement that they did something wrong is at play here. I want to applaud the Ghanaian government for taking upon herself to push this through the UNGA and having it passed. But the bottom line is, how soon will the United Nations implement that acknowledgement or force those countries involved to make those reparations? It is a very good first step, but we need to see that follow through. And the fact that we have 3 countries that obviously have a greater share of slave descendants voting no only tells us where their allegiance and their pocketbook or their monetary attention is. They don't want to pay. That is the bottom line. But it is a very good first step. Now, in terms of how that is going to play out, I don't know how that is going to play out. But I know that in the history classrooms, this debate has been going on for decades. And finally, to see it come to fruition with at least a resolution acknowledging it as a crime against humanity is a very good thing. Thank you. Did I
That's
answer the
amazing,
question?
right there. Very excellently. But Kamisa, please.
There's some noise background. Well, the acknowledgement is actually very important. But before I get there, let us go back a little bit on this thing in Acquire, the Fulanese. No, it is a mistake for us to think that the B are not doing. The B are doing exactly when they. The B were not sent there to go and defend the people of Acquire. They were sent there to go and fight Ambazonians. What is happening in Acquire with the Fulanese, or the Buru, what you call it, it's not unique. We've had these reports here. The same thing was happening in Kambe, it's happening in Munzu. There's not a single occasion where the bees have confronted the Burus or the Fulanese. I remember, if I'm right, even the so-called Ngarubu, they engaged them on arms and they want to kill people. So the Fulanese are doing exactly, the bees are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And so they were not trained to defend the country, they were trained to kill Ambazonians. And so they will not engage the Fulanese in any form or shape. And I remember the last report we heard, the people there reported to the DOs, to the administrators. And what was the response? They told them, well, the Fulanese are killing your people, no problem. Your own sons are in the bush. Go and bring them out first, then we can address that one. That is enough to say about it. Then over to the slave trade or slavery recognition. It's actually very important, absolutely important. But the important thing is to see those who voted against and those who abstained. Against United States, Israel, and one other country. And the United States was one of the greatest beneficiaries of slavery. The farms were in the United States. The slaves worked all those farms. In addition to that, the slaves built the White House. Their labor was there. And so it is for the Americans to answer that question. There's something must be done. But the other bloc that did not oppose, but they simply abstained. 27, 28, 27. Those countries are in the majority European. It is Europe that imported slaves from Africa. Portugal, Spain, the UK, France. These are people who came around looking to look for labor and work in their farms. It's part of the agricultural revolution. They took our people to go and work. Should there be compensation? It should be compensation. But how can they compensate? We know that so many Africans went there. If you are here, those of us in the United States, you see so many black people. Because you cannot know where they are. These people, are these Momo people who don't know. But of all that, Amazonia still has the living scars of the export of human beings. We still have the slave port in Victoria. It is still standing there right now as a symbol of what they did to us. Where they brought them from Mali, wherever they brought them, they were exported from Victoria, our own coastline. And today, what we can do, because the European countries that all abstain, they happen to now belong to an economic bloc, the EU. They also happen to belong to a political bloc in the EU. So they have a lot of influence. If they must compensate, and they should, if I were in the government of Amazonia at the time, I would insist all those people in that bloc that are actually responsible for the export, they should come to the port where they exported our people in Victoria, which is still there today, called slave port. They should come there and build that international deep sea port there. We should name it. Come and invest. Because they get the money to Cameroon today, they will give it to Yaoundé. Whoever, they will take it away. There's no slave port in Douala or Kribi. The only slave port we have in our land is in Victoria. And so let them come there and develop that thing as an obligation, as compensation for what we put in the first place. Other things follow. That's my suggestion.
That's amazing.
Can I add something? Add something real quick.
Yes, please. Add something before Barrister concludes.
Yes. I know the issue of compensation is actually quite intriguing, and the so-called European nations, especially the UK, benefited from slavery. They were the insurers of the slave ship and the human cargo. They were the ones who gave loans to slave traders and estate builders in the Americas to open plantations and start shipping Africans as laborers. And they, during the abolitionist movement, when slavery was abolished, had to pay compensation already to their slave traders and dealers before they could agree to abolish slave trade. And so for them to now be doing as if reparations is something out of the blue, or that is unheard of, is the duplicity that we see with some of these things, because slave traders were heavily compensated for them to stop slave trade. And so part of the resistance and part of refusing to acknowledge that slavery was a crime in the past was also, the old age erasure of Africans' contributions to modernity and humanity, because acknowledging that means that they were going to say, yes, Africans contributed to the building of America, or to the capitalist economy that emerged across America and Western Europe, and therefore recognizing the contributions of Black people. And so that historical erasure has always existed, and that is part of the resistance. Thank you.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm bringing Barrister Fru into it now to conclude on this aspect, so we can round off the show. Barrister Fru, please.
Paddy, I'd like to take this opportunity to pay homage to an African song the president of Ghana to have made history. He has taken, he took this thing to the General Assembly of the United Nations rather than to the Compromise Security Council. He took it to the United Nations General Assembly, which has now become a resolution of the United Nations. The next step will be to introduce a sub-resolution or another resolution about reparation. Because these people, particularly this country where we are now, benefited a lot from the slave trade. Free labor to work on their farms, the cotton fields, wherever in the south. All the workers were slaves. They were never paid. They came from the African continent. They have suffered. They continue to suffer from racism. They were lynched. They killed a lot of them, and they have gotten away with a war crime. I don't care whether they voted against it or not. When it will come to reparations, the matter will be more serious than it is now. But the African son who took this initiative and pushed it through should go down in history as the greatest African that has ever lived, the president of Ghana. Now, having said that, those countries in Europe that abstained, they abstained out of shame because a lot of them were slave traders. A lot of them took slaves, and they are what they are today thanks to the slaves that they took. And they are ashamed of what they did, and they cannot be seen voting. It's out of shame, and I would prefer that they abstain rather than vote against, because those who voted against are the greatest beneficiary of mankind's iniquity. Look at Israel. Israel was founded in 1948 by the very people who benefited from slave trade, the British, in 1948. And they took Zionists all over the world and settled in the land of Palestine. They have since become a world power. They have nuclear weapons. They can kill at will. They kill at will. And yet, when it comes to the issue of slave trade, they vote against without any explanation. They are the greatest beneficiary of what has happened to the world. Israel has received more from the world than he ever gave the world. When I talk of Israel, I want to make a distinction between the biblical Israel and the Zionist Israel that exists on earth at this time. The biblical Israel that we know was the Israel that God created and made man what man is today. But the Zionists, wherever they came from, have shown the other side of the Almighty, the satanic side of Almighty. For them to vote against this resolution is a slap to the African continent. And all the African presidents should take judicial notice of what Israel has done. Voting against slave trade, where a human being was taken and carried across rivers and oceans to go and do free work and die and be killed and be hanged and be discriminated against and be treated as subhumans, and Israel that has benefited from the African continent would vote against. There are many countries in Africa that are hanging on to Israel, Cameroon being one of them. They are people of the same feather. Cameroon is having its military, is so-called be trained and armed in Israel. And Cameroon, I don't know which way they voted, but let me say this. Slave trade was the greatest crime that was ever committed on the human being. And it takes an African soil to bring it to the limelight so that the world can see. And the world has agreed. And let's see the next step. Thank you very much.
Well said. Well said. All right.
A lot for this program, but I'd like just so Professor Table, sorry for echo, to just give a statement discussion that we had. I will continue the discussion most probably with Dr. Munzo when he accepts. Please just give us any final statements as we complete.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank my co-panelists, Barrister Fru and Barrister Mbesa. Thank you, Director Padi, for bringing this discussion to bear. It is a serious discussion because we have an existential war upon us, and it is a war of survival of Southern Cameroons. And so this should not be taken very lightly. Whatever we do, if we don't do it right, we will be disappeared. That is the track record of La République du Cameroon. And so we need to know exactly what we are doing. We need to know how to regroup and re-strategize, because whatever debates are going on WhatsApp or TikTok or whatever, there is a war going on. There is crime against humanity being committed in Southern Cameroons. There is the illegal occupation of Southern Cameroons by La République. There is the issue of trying to find our foothold in the family of nations. And so we need to stay focused. We need to make sure that we follow all the avenues open to us. And we are hoping that since the Pope has decided to grace our land with his presence, something good will come out of it. Peace, and that peace that comes with justice. Because without justice, there can be no peace. Thank you so much. Aluta continua.
Adi, your microphone. We cannot hear
You're
you.
muted.
Assuming that I've been able to handle the issue of the echo without knowing that I've handled it, but I did not keep myself in sync. So I want to thank you, Barrister Fru, Barrister Mbesia, for always being there for the people of Ambazonia. Your insight conversations always help us to learn, and we keep learning. The people, we keep learning and advocating for the freedom of Ambazonia. Thank you all again, once again, for you should have been somewhere enjoying your Saturday, the three of you, but you're committed as patriots to fight media battles. I
have something to say
thank
for
you. Thank you. Okay.
Barrister Mbesa has something to
Please,
say.
Barrister Mbesa, I cannot deny you that opportunity, Barrister Mbesa, please.
I think I should make this remark, which I wanted to make at the beginning. You see, what we do here is
Make it quick.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, we educate people, and then people want to quote us, they should quote us rightly. 2 days ago, I saw on our news ABS, where he was reporting that we discussed on this program, how we had filed a complaint in Belgium and claimed that we claimed that Sama had reported fellow Ambazonians by filing our universal jurisdiction in Belgium. He mentioned my name and Barras, and so that we said that Sama had filed a complaint against fellow Ambazonians, which was all dishonesty. Luckily enough, Sama himself was there and say, look, well, that's not what it was. The universal jurisdiction was against Cameroon government and Nigerians. But what was Anu trying to insinuate? He was trying to paint us black. That rather than fight the enemy, we were fighting other Amazonians. And I would like
He
this
was trying to
opportunity,
manipulate the.
yeah, to tell Mr. Anu, if you want to quote us, especially if you want to put my name
Yeah.
there, make sure you quote the right thing. This is absolute dishonesty because this is the second time. Let people understand this. About a year ago, we were dealing with the ICC. A certain Dr. Masanga claimed that he had filed a complaint at the ICC. I will say, what filed on what proof? Anu came on his ABS and alleged they were trying to steal Dr. Masanga's work. And so, again, this is the second time. If you don't have the facts, verify them. What we filed at the in Belgium was universal jurisdiction. Our disagreement was the way Sama handled it. Sama was the lead person there. He did not do what we told him to do, and the file was closed. We did not file that petition against for the prosecution of Choyaba, or we don't even know them. And so again, I thought I should make this clear. Whoever, besides ABS, if you want to quote us here, make sure you get the facts correctly. If you don't know them, we have numbers. Call us and find out. Because you are free to use our broadcast for your own educational purposes. But make sure you're giving out the right information. Don't quote our names. Don't quote
speaking the truth
when you
accurately.
Okay. Say what we say.
Don't misquote
Thank you.
us.
Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you again, once again, by Tambesia. Thank you all for coming and have a beautiful weekend. Actually, it is quite interesting Chris Arno would spend some time to view our program. I know that he watches us time because I've seen him comment on a lot of interviews that I've had on his platform. I don't watch him. His content is not something that is really worth my time. Maybe because I have a foreknowledge of Chris Arno, aside from those who are just watching him on the screen, and I know the limit of the extent of his knowledge vis-a-vis the story of the people of the Southern Cameroons. The interesting fact is, since he has the time to scrutinize the things we do or broadcast on air, the show of today is a good research material for Chris Arno. I think it's important for him to spend some time in today's show to learn some things. If he wants to continue pretending to be speaking for the people of the Southern Cameroons, then he would need this show to educate himself on a lot of things, the historicity and the legality of the story of the people of the Southern Cameroons, which I know he is really void. He doesn't know the distinction between the referendum and the plebiscite and the fraud. On a couple of times he wanted to give his speech by talking about Southern Cameroon's history, especially in 2021, 1st October. That was after the president's speech. It was a total flop, though he was helped by Dennis Kengfak or something. Maybe that's the name. I'm not very sure if I'm pronouncing the name well. I think that man is an intelligent man, but probably he is not as intelligent as one would think, or his facts are not very clear enough to have helped Arno compile his historical speech well. He exposed himself even more when there was a debate about the referendum and the plebiscite. And that is why he would so relaxedly suggest that the people of the Southern Cameroons can easily opt for a federation, and maybe after 20 years. What craziness. And after 20 years, after they have been armed, they would want to pick up guns to go continue fighting the war. That is the terrible, shocking proposal that Chris Arno was suggesting to the people of Amazonia. And he has continuously and stylishly, using the law of the subliminal impact of the media, bringing federalists to his platform to educate the people of Amazonia and provoke federalist tendencies within our community, which I think is sad. Today we've had the chance to not just debunk the inaccuracies in the narration of the Southern Cameroon's history as a professor, that is Dr. Simon Munzo, and a legal mind, which some school of thought believe that he is not ignorant of these facts, but probably just a clever form of manipulating and playing the bidding of the colonial administration. It would be unfair for us to continue this discussion, part 2, part 3, part 4, without having the man himself to come and, as a lecturer, explain himself clearly. Maybe we were just paraphrasing what he implied. It's an opportunity for us to have this conversation with him and the lawyers, and we'll have a panel discussion. He may want to come with his friends, Rebecca Enonchong, if he wants to come with Evis, or the journalist, whoever he is willing to come with. We're ready, we're open. This is 2026. Our strategies have changed. We're going to be having open debates between them and us. Like President Sarkozy says, federalists, unionists, special institutionists, and anybody that is not for the total independence of the Southern Cameroons is on the side of Bia. So we are willing to start having educational programs between them and us. Unapologetically, we believe, like Barrister Mbesi has said earlier on, that the history of the Southern Cameroons has been so well documented that it cannot be manipulated by anyone. And that's the truth. You can't manipulate it no matter you try. It's been a beautiful Saturday. I'm very delighted that I had the chance of having a professor, my professor, Professor Bridget Table, with us here, and the lawyers that these three panelists were so brilliant in their expose this afternoon. And I believe the nation of Amazonia can be confident once again that this movement is not just an effort in futility, or is not just a path out of ignorance or a path in darkness. This is a struggle that is advocated, that has before it frontliners that are sound, not just in what they're fighting for, but they really have a strategy. Thank you once again. Until next week, it's Vital Pariking. I'll leave you with the ABC Amber TV images.
When we think about how revolutions happen, we usually picture scenes like this: massive crowds of protesters holding flags, clashing in the streets against riot police. It is loud, visible, and intensely physical. We focus on the firepower. We measure the strength of an opposition by the number of guns, the severity of the blockades, and the heavily armed military personnel patrolling the borders. If the battle isn't on the ground, we assume it's happening here, in massive international summits and diplomatic halls, where we expect global political networks to swoop in and decide a nation's fate. But physical skirmishes and political theater are symptoms of a conflict, not the root. The actual space where a nation's future is won or lost is entirely invisible. On Saturday, March 28, 2026, a broadcast went out across the Voice of Amazonia International Network. The host, Sista Airfrizi, delivered a specific message to her listeners. She told them straight out, building a nation does not start with pouring concrete for roads, erecting office buildings, or raising a flag. If the mindset of the people is weak, these physical systems will eventually collapse under their own weight. To win the physical conflict on the ground, a population must first recognize and win the quiet internal war raging inside their own minds. Judith Ilando argues that resilience is rooted in the connection between a person's inner truth and their psychological stability. When this bond is strong, an individual can withstand immense external pressure. Long-term oppression actively severs that connection, creating a psychological vacuum. When individuals lose their anchor to their own purpose, that empty space is quickly filled by fear and confusion. That state of fear acts as fertile ground for specific cognitive traps. These invisible chains cause an oppressed group to unconsciously sabotage their own path to liberation. Identifying these cognitive traps is a tactical necessity. We have to look at how resistance movements fail from the inside out to understand why they stall. The first of these chains is Murphy's Law, or the trap of expected failure. This happens when a population has endured so many setbacks that their immediate reaction to any new idea is simply, "That won't work for us." They give up before they even begin. When a nation's collective mindset stops trying, the external enemy doesn't even need to fire a shot. The war is already lost. The second chain is the housefly effect. Look at this erratic movement. This represents a complete death of focus. Instead of moving forward, a population simply reacts to daily rumors, sudden crises, and endless distractions. Living tomorrow based on today's rumor means nothing lasts long enough to grow. Progress requires patience, and jumping from one panic to the next prevents any long-term structural development. Combine those two traps, preemptive surrender and chronic distraction, and a population completely neutralizes its own ability to mount an organized, sustained threat against an oppressor. Then we hit the third chain, the flea effect. This animation shows points continuously bouncing against an artificially lowered ceiling. In psychology, this is internalized limitation, believing change is impossible after long suppression. The tragedy is when the oppressor's barrier is removed. The population still restricts its potential, jumping low because the barrier is fully cemented in their minds. The fourth and most insidious chain is misused reciprocity. Humans naturally want to be loyal. If someone helps us, we feel an instinct to give back. But oppressive systems weaponize this exact trait. Because of a small favor or a minor concession, populations are manipulated into defending the very structures that keep them dependent. They trade away their long-term future out of a misplaced sense of gratitude. A population can only reclaim its agency by breaking these specific internal limits and redirecting that loyalty toward things that actually build them up. These four chains show us exactly where the true friction lies. The most formidable barriers to a nation's freedom are rarely the concrete walls built by enemies, but the limitations the population accepts within itself. When individuals break these invisible chains, their personal resilience adds to a collective strength. This shared fortitude forms a foundation that external pressures struggle to break. It requires a massive behavioral shift. Loyalty has to be actively redirected to local community structures. Sustained focus must replace reactionary panic, and a proactive belief in success has to overwrite years of defeatism. Sista Air Force's podcast boiled it down to this. Look at the land. A nation's physical reality, the borders, the towns, the infrastructure, is entirely dependent on the imagination and mindset of its people. With the internal war won, the oppressor loses their most effective weapon, the ability to control a population from within. When a mind is truly liberated, the physical and political systems of oppression lose the psychological leverage they need to survive.